Military has said it has breached Hamas's defense lines in Gaza's southern city of Khan Yunis and surrounded the home of the terror group's leader, Yahya Sinwar. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said it's only a matter of time before the Israeli forces find the 61-year-old. Sinwar is believed to be the chief architect of the 7th October massacre, the bloodiest day in Israeli history. Hours after the IDF confirmed that it launched a combined attack on Khan Yunis city against the centers of gravity of the Hamas terror organization, Netanyahu stated, "Last night I said that our forces could go anywhere in the Gaza Strip. They are currently surrounding Sinwar's house. His home is not his castle and he can flee, but it is only a matter of time until we find him." According to reports, Sinwar was last located at number 5 Street in northwest Khan Yunis. Last week, IDF chief Herzi Halevi had said, "We're asked frequently about the destruction in Gaza. Hamas is the address. Sinwar is the address." Israel says their operation in southern Gaza has been focused on weeding out the top Hamas leaders. They have declared Sinwar as a dead man walking. The Israeli military also believe that many other top Hamas officials and several of the hostages are in Khan Yunis, the largest city in southern Gaza. So who is Sinwar? He is considered to be the de facto leader of Hamas in Gaza since the group's political chief stays mostly in Qatar and Turkey. Born in the Khan Yunis refugee camp, the 61-year-old was elected as Hamas's leader in Gaza in 2017. He spent more than 2 decades behind bars in Israel before being freed 12 years ago in a deal that his brother helped negotiate. On the 7th of October this year, Sinwar outsmarted Israel with the same hostage-taking tactic, resulting in Israel's deadliest day on record. Sinwar was arrested in 1988 and sentenced to consecutive life terms on charges of planning the abduction and murder of 2 Israeli soldiers and the murder of 4 Palestinians. He previously headed the Al-Majid security apparatus, which tracked, killed and punished Palestinians accused of collaborating with Israel's secret service. Israelis believe Sinwar is hiding underground somewhere in Gaza, negotiating with world powers over hostage releases. Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has warned that the humanitarian system in Gaza may collapse and public order could completely break down. He also invoked Article 99 of the founding UN Charter, a rarely used rule to refer the situation in Gaza to the UN Security Council, urging its members to avert a humanitarian catastrophe and terming the ongoing war as a threat to international peace and security. Israel's envoy, who has repeatedly lashed out at the UN, called this move a new moral law and, along with the country's foreign minister, called on Guterres to resign. In fact, the Israeli foreign minister went a step further and called Guterres' tenure as UN chief a danger to world peace. On the ground in the war zone, reports suggest the Israeli army is deploying tanks at the Palestine Square in Gaza City. There are reports of heavy casualties in several neighborhoods in northern Gaza, and it's difficult for ambulances to reach the affected areas because of the gunfire. Reports also say the Othman bin Kushkar Mosque may have been destroyed, but the IDF has yet to comment on that. The Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza has seen very heavy fighting as Israeli tanks surround the area. The Hamas-run local authority says about 100,000 people are still in the camp without a functioning hospital and facing the risk of starvation. No aid has reached the north since the humanitarian truce ended last week. Multiple UN agencies are warning of the dire situation for residents of war-torn Gaza. The World Health Organization chief has said Gaza's health system is on its knees and nearing total collapse. The head of the World Food Programme has said the humanitarian system in the Gaza Strip is collapsing and everyone in Gaza is hungry. Hamas attacked Israel on the 7th of October, killing 1,200 people and taking 240 hostages, some of whom were released during a 7-day truce recently. Hamas officials in Gaza say Israel has killed more than 16,200 people in its retaliatory campaign, including about 7,000 children.
Yesterday I said that our forces could reach anywhere in the Gaza Strip. Today they are encircling Sinwar's house. His house may not be his fortress, and he can escape. But it's only a matter of time before we get him.
Today's emissions gap report shows that if nothing changes, in 2030 emissions will be 22 gigatons higher than the 1.5 degree limit would allow.
Given the scale of the loss of human life in Gaza and in Israel in such a short amount of time, the Secretary General has today delivered a letter to the President of the Security Council invoking Article 99 of the Charter of the United Nations. This is the first time that Antonio Guterres has done this since he became Secretary General in 2017. Article 99 states, and I quote, that the Secretary General may bring to the attention of the Security Council any matter in his opinion that may threaten the maintenance of international peace and security. In the letter, which has been shared with you, the Secretary General urges the members of the Security Council to press to avert a humanitarian catastrophe, and he appeals for a humanitarian ceasefire to be declared.
The Secretary made very clear in a speech he gave several weeks ago in Tokyo, where he laid out the principles that the United States supports when it comes to the end of this conflict in Gaza. One of those principles was that there must be no reduction in the size of Gaza. And that remains our position, and it will remain our position. So if any proposed buffer zone was inside Gaza, that would be a violation of that principle, and it's something that we oppose. If it's with respect to something in Israeli territory, I won't speak to that. That's a decision for the Israelis to make. But we're very clear that when it comes to reduction in the size of Gaza, that's not something the United States.
All right. So let's dissect the latest developments with our guests. Joining me on Global Lens tonight is Lieutenant Colonel Yahya Sinwar of the Medical Corporation with the IDF and Emeritus Professor at the Faculty of Social Sciences in the Tel Aviv University. He joins us live from Tel Aviv tonight. Itai Melchior, welcome back. Melchior is a researcher and advisor on Middle East and Africa affairs and former executive with the Israeli National Security Council. He joins us live from Haifa, and completing the panel tonight is Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma, defense and geopolitical expert. He joins us from New Delhi. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Lieutenant Colonel Yahya Sinwar, if I may start with you. I want, you to explain to our viewers the importance of tracking down Yahya Sinwar. Prime Minister Netanyahu says his house has been encircled. Even if he is not present there, it's only a matter of time before the IDF gets him. It is believed that he is somewhere underground in Gaza, very likely holding negotiations on the release of hostages. He is also widely believed to be the man who was the mastermind or the chief architect of 7th of October. Would that be correct to say? So if you could just explain to our viewers, why is this man so important for IDF?
Well, the most important thing to us, the Israeli public, is one of the most important things is actually to restore sense of security to the country, which has been actually detrimentally damaged during the 7th of October. And more importantly, the return of our hostages. These are children, women, and men who were abducted. The youngest of them is by now 9 or 10 months old. We are very concerned about the well-being of these people. And it is believed that putting pressure on the leaders of Hamas would actually enable the return of these individuals who have done nothing wrong. A 9-month-old baby, when he was abducted, could not do any harm to the Hamas or the Palestinian people. And we're very concerned with the well-being of these individuals, women, men, young people, and also elderly. So it is believed that putting pressure on the leaders of Hamas would enable the repatriation of our hostages.
Well, certainly, ma'am, one of the biggest concerns for Israel continues to be the release of the remaining hostages. There are some 150 who are still in captivity. I will come back to you in just a moment, but let me go across to Itai Melchior now. Mr. Melchior, if you could explain to our viewers, why is this man so important? Yes, of course, Israel has said from the beginning that they want to wipe out Hamas, they want to finish its military capabilities, and they are not going to spare the leadership. But why is Sinwar so important to Israel's military campaign?
Yes, so we all know that war is not only about war, and in many cases there's a lot of symbolism attached to war and what happens. So of course, when you get to a leader of this organization, this will be a strong, a moral blow to the forces, to the troops. I will also even speculate that even once he is killed, and that will not be fully confirmed, the Hamas will not let out that news. Because again, symbolism is important, the spirit is important, and the fighters, the terrorists, are fighting for their leader. So getting the leaders, of course, anybody can be replaced. And of course, the fact that his house is being surrounded is, again, it's what I just mentioned, it's symbolism. It doesn't mean we know he's not there. He's well underground and in hiding and in a location which is difficult to get to. But just the fact that we are in his house and around his house is a strong moral blow, even though most Gazans who are not connected to the world net will have no knowledge of this, because of course they get a different picture of what is going on in Gaza than the viewers in around the world who are getting actual live images that are also supplied by the Israeli army.
So let me ask you this question. You and other Israelis are saying that this is symbolically significant, that Sinwar's house has been surrounded. You believe he is very much in Gaza, hiding underground. Prime Minister Netanyahu has expressed the confidence that it's only a matter of time before IDF gets him. But again, to understand the importance of Yahya Sinwar, would it be correct to say that, one, Israel believes that he indeed was the chief architect of the 7th October massacre, and two, that it was Sinwar who over the years led the Israeli leadership to believe that Hamas was no longer interested in fighting, that it wanted to focus on issues of governance instead?
Well, you are spot on, Neha, because of course, again, as the leader, he's the architect, and even if there were people under him doing the detailed planning, of course, the leadership is in charge. We discussed this from the other side of the Israeli leadership's responsibilities. Of course, he is the one who's responsible for this, and he's certainly the mastermind. He's someone to be reckoned. He's an educated man. He's a leader. He's popular. And of course, everything that happens today in Gaza is under his leadership, under his spirit. So that's what makes him so important. Again, the minute that he is killed, someone else will step into his shoes, and Hamas will still have a leader. We actually did him a favor by killing one of his big competitors in the Hamas a few days ago, another contender for the position, which actually maybe even helped him. But in the end, Israel has always stood behind this, that we need to catch, kill, or bring to sentence anybody who's done big harm to the Jewish people. I don't know if your viewers are aware, but Israel even fought Nazi criminals who did hideous crimes against Jews even before the establishment of the State of Israel. Then the Israeli state used the Mossad to catch and bring to justice Nazi criminals. The same is true for the Munich massacre during the Olympic Games, which after Israel went on a worldwide hunt for the perpetrators and the leaders. So Israel has always stood fast that people who perpetrate this kind of crime have to pay the price.
All right. Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma, let me bring you in now. How justified in your assessment is Prime Minister Netanyahu's optimism or confidence that it's only a matter of time before the IDF gets to Yahya Sinwar, the man who Israel believes to be the chief architect of October 7. And if they do manage to eliminate him, and there is an if there, because remember that we are talking about a labyrinth of underground tunnels that the IDF will have to navigate before they can get to a man like him. But if they are able to eliminate him, how much of a blow do you think that is likely to be to Hamas and its military operations?
Thank you, Neha, for inviting me. Now, the fact of the matter is that, like Israel, we have also been through insurgencies throughout our life. And we see leading up and leaders going away, and insurgencies and terrorism still surviving beyond leadership. Now, Yahya Sinwar's name has been around from the time, even before, of course, 7th of October, the dastardly attack. And we know that Yahya Sinwar may be around it. If we know his house, which was located in Khan Yunis, they could have destroyed it earlier also, and didn't wait for a ground operation to be carried out in this manner to Yahya Sinwar's house. But rightly speaking, he will not be there. He will not be easily traceable. He has a charismatic personality. He has a following. But as it stands, Hamas was not the favorite of the Palestinians in Gaza. Hamas was, as the statistics have been showing, and as what many others who have done surveys have shown, Hamas was not so very popular. So Yahya Sinwar may have taken up the operations and done what he done, dastardly attack on 7th of October. But he was not the end all. He is not the entire Gaza. He is one man, and one man who did something bad on 7th, very bad on 7th of October. I'll say that what happens in such situations, that the alternatives, the second and third rung and the fourth rungs would always be around. Osama bin Laden died. The other fellow was standing waiting in the shoes around here, and so has it continued across the board in wherever insurgency takes place. You see the IRA, you see whichever insurgency we can talk about. We know the alternative men will be there, and alternatives will arise. Maybe in 10 days, maybe the operational efficacy will be lost for some time. But you can't say that Yahya Sinwar's death, even if it happens, whenever it happens, will cause a cessation of the eventology that's taking place in Gaza.
Well, you've certainly made an important point there, sir, that, even if one leader is eliminated, there will always be substitutes or alternatives who will emerge. And at the end of the day, we also have to remember that Hamas is a terror organization, yes, but it's also an ideology. And it is much, much tougher to wipe out an ideology as opposed to just going after the military infrastructure of an organization. So let me ask you this question, General Sharma. You are a military man. Before I go back to our Israeli guests, and I've raised this question multiple times on my show. When Israel says this war will be over only once we've achieved a complete victory, and a complete victory would mean the end of Hamas. How realistic is that target? How long drawn out a war is this likely to be? And can you really completely wipe out Hamas? Has Israel, according to you, clearly defined its military objectives? Because there are some who say it hasn't.
So Israel took a maximalist position when they undertook this operation after 7th of October, saying they will eliminate Hamas from
Okay, my apologies for that bad link. We seem to be having a problem with Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma's link. We will go back to him in a moment, but let me put this question to Lieutenant Colonel Zahawa Solomon at this point. Ma'am, this is a question that's often asked of our Israeli guests. You say you want to wipe out Hamas, but what does that really mean in concrete terms? And how long a war do you think this is likely to be? There are some who are saying that this could actually go on a really long time, and there is a very real risk that Israel runs of facing a multi-front war in the days ahead, because we keep talking about how there is Hezbollah in Lebanon, there are the Houthi rebels in Yemen, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Houthi rebels in Yemen who've already launched attacks on ships, and of course there is Iran. Therefore, the question really is, for how long do you think Israel can afford to be at war?
It's a tough question because nobody can actually foresee the future. But if we look at our history, which for 2,000 years have been set by pogrom, deportation, and the like, and the State of Israel was founded 75 years ago with the hope of securing a homeland for the Jewish people. So I think that we have no other option but actually to do everything in our power to actually build a safe home for our people. And therefore, even if the war goes on and lingers on for a long period of time, the citizens of Israel are determined to have a secure homeland. And therefore, I mean, it's inconceivable to us that it will clearly end, because we know that we are surrounded by hostile countries. But if we look at history, then we see that there are some important Arab countries who over the years have established diplomatic relationships with Israel, despite the fact that they fought us fiercely early on. So with this hope, I do believe that even if the war lingers on, at the end of the day, we will have a secure state, because we have no other option.
Okay, you're saying we're going to have a secure state regardless of how long the war lingers on for. Israel has said from day one that we are exercising our right to self-defense, but there are many, like the French president, who recently said there can be no lasting peace and security for Israel if it comes at the cost of so many Palestinian lives and at the risk of antagonizing so many countries in the region. I want to put that question to Itai Melchior. Itai Melchior, these are not my words, these are words of French President Emmanuel Macron. How can there be lasting peace and security for Israel if it comes at the cost of thousands and thousands of Palestinian lives and the growing resentment that we see in the region, in the Arab world? These are countries Israel is surrounded by.
You give me the toughest questions, Neha. It's a good question. And
because I have confidence in your abilities to answer them.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Actually, earlier today, I was speaking to a colleague, a good friend of mine from your country, and we were discussing exactly this issue. And my answer was that we are programmed in Western thinking, in modern thinking, that every problem has a solution. And sadly, that is not the case. There are some things that are very difficult to resolve. Of course, there are solutions, but any solution that is found in the end game is going to come to a cost to one or both sides. So I know that there's a lot of optimism. Oh, we just have to beat the Hamas and then we go on to a two-state solution. But because you yourself mentioned earlier on that Hamas is not an organization, it's an ideology, then most Israelis are now saying we cannot have a Hamas ideology ruling. If it's called Hamas or it's called something else, doesn't matter. Just 10 kilometers away from 80% of the population in Israel, or 20 kilometers away. So therefore, the long-term solution will have to have a totally different regional architecture that will enable both Israel to have security and the Palestinians to have their self-rule and their dignity and their rights fulfilled, and the ability to move on. You know, the big hope for Gaza was that when Israel pulled out, and Israel pulled out of the last inch of Gaza about almost 19 years ago. And the hope was that Gaza was going to be Singapore of the Middle East. You know, they have a border with another Arab Muslim country, with Egypt. They have beautiful beaches. They have population which is relatively educated for Middle East. And the hope was that this will take a positive turn. And sadly, it took a turn to the worse, with Hamas coming democratically, I have to say, to power there, which shows, again, your point that it's very difficult to eliminate a movement which has popular vote in the region, and therefore education and time will be needed.
Okay, I believe we have Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma back with us. Let's hope we have better luck with his line this time. Sir, I was asking you this question earlier. Let me flesh it out for you. You know, Israel says we want to wipe out Hamas from the face of this planet. The question I was trying to ask you is this a realistic military target that Israel has set for itself? Can you really completely wipe out an organization like Hamas? Can you stamp out an ideology? Because Hamas is also that. Plus, I'd like to have your thoughts on what the French president has said. Emmanuel Macron says, how can there be lasting security for Israel if it comes at the cost of thousands of Palestinian lives and results in so much resentment in the Arab world?
Thank you, Neha. I'm sorry, my line was bad. Now, the question asking is absolutely logical. The fact of the matter is that, you know, they said there are about 27,000 to 40,000 odd Hamas there. In the duration of, as you mentioned earlier, about 16,000 plus people have died, of which 12,000 were women and children. 45,000 people have been injured. By the very standards, the Hamas should have been wiped off by now. But Hamas has not been wiped off because, you know, the operations are continuing even down in Khan Yunis. So, like you said rightly, there is an ideology. You know, once upon a time, General Petraeus had said, you kill a terrorist in case his family members are available to take on weapons. That killing of the terrorist is a negative. Now, if 40,000 Hamas, about 100,000 people support us, this the way operations are being carried out will generate one more huge mammoth organization, which may or may not be called Hamas, but would be available for carrying out this indefinitely hereafter. And second point I wish to make is that, you know, killing Hamas is a maximalist position taken by, it's not even killing Hamas, killing the Hamas's ideology, killing Hamas's ability to govern, or, you know, to do as a political entity in Gaza. And also it was taken as an existential crisis. While killing the people who did the Munich massacre is one thing, but a catastrophic, you know, and I firstly accept the 7th October was actually very, very bad. But having said that, killing 50,000 odd people, you know, killing or injuring is not the answer of removing the ideology. We are leading on to a situation that will remain open-ended in this form for a very long time to go. So, you know, and Hamas is not, like you said, an ideology. You cannot differentiate between which people are Hamas and which people are people, civilian, innocent people of Palestine. There is no segregation. The terrorist today has become hybrid in nature. He is overground one day, he is underground tomorrow, and you are fighting into various strata. You're fighting in the air, you're fighting on ground, you're also fighting subterranean. This is not the kind of war that is easily closed. You know, one feels no end state coming up easily. And how do you get across some kind of end state in this?
That's a very valid question. So then let me ask you another question, sir. What do you believe that Netanyahu, who is already facing a lot of criticism, not just globally because of the killings of Palestinians, but even at home because of his massive failure and the massive intelligence failure that couldn't prevent 7th October in the first place. Now, many believe he is looking for revenge. There are those who say he is looking for a face saver. So, let me ask you this. If Israel has set itself unrealistic targets, what do you think is the face saver or a potential off-ramp that the far-right government of Israel headed by Netanyahu could be looking for in this situation?
You see, we've reached a situation that even predicting an end state is so very difficult, You just can't find an answer. What the Palestinian people which are located in Gaza are being pushed to a strip which is the size of a football ground. The statistics say that 400 people use one toilet. You see the kind of pressure brought across. Now, Israel has sacked the humanitarian coordinator, Miss Lynn Hastings, and sent her out of Israel. There is no end in sight. The only way out is if you get the countries, the Arab countries of this area, to come inside Gaza in some form and take over governance in some area, not the Palestinian Authority, but the friendly countries like Turkey or Qatar for that matter, or Saudi Arabia and Egypt, to come and take over the governance, and we start having a rebuilding methodology here. Otherwise, this form of the war that is continuing, it is open-ended, because the Hamas will not die so easily. And there will be some response, and not one rocket will come out every second day and be fired at some place or the other, which will cause again next lessons to start off. So the only way out is to find a favorable Arab country force to come and take over the governance and bring about peace in this area, and then start thinking. See, a terrorist is a fellow. You can still find him tomorrow or day after, or after 2 months. But killing people, civilian, it's very difficult to rewind the situation back here.
And you're right, sir, because fact of the matter is that many would say today that the mood of the world has changed rapidly since the 7th of October. While there was a lot of support and sympathy for Israel earlier on, now there is growing anger and outrage, given so many Palestinians have died. More than 16,000 we are told, and some 7,000 of them were children. And you say Hamas is not going to die that easily. Those are ominous words. Let me go back to Mr. Melchior at this point. Itai Melchior, I have a slightly different question for you. Of course, I know you don't speak for the government of Israel, but I want you to tell our viewers this. Lynn Hastings, the general just mentioned, has been sort of expelled by Israel. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that the humanitarian system in Gaza is on the verge of collapse, and the UN Security Council must do everything possible to avert a humanitarian catastrophe, and the ongoing war is a threat to international peace and security. A lot of right-minded people would agree with what Antonio Guterres has said, but look at the response that's come from Israel. The UN envoy, I beg your pardon, the Israeli envoy to the UN, who has lashed out at the organization multiple times in the past, has called this move by Guterres a new moral law, called on him to resign. The Israeli foreign minister goes as far as to say Antonio Guterres' tenure as UN chief is a danger to world peace. I have a simple question for you. Why is Israel at war with the United Nations?
Well, as you said, I don't speak for the government, but if you go out on the street and ask Israelis how they feel about the UN, I think that you will see that this is the general sentiment, because the UN as an organization, and if you start looking at the number of condemnations against Israel, special meetings about Israel, you will see that there's a disproportionate interest in Israel, while huge atrocities were happening elsewhere and have been totally disregarded. Israel gets called out every time. Now, You can argue about this, but in the end, we see, and Antonio Guterres started off on the left foot specifically with this campaign when he said that the attack by Hamas was somehow had a background which was understandable, and this was something that every Israeli took very difficult. And Israelis, and it's not from today, and it's not from a year ago. David Ben-Gurion, Israel's leader and some will say establisher, already said in the 50s that he does not trust the UN with this disproportionate attention to Israel. So this is on that. Remember that in the north, where we are facing maybe a bigger crisis, we have a UN resolution 1701, which was brokered by the UN to end the Second Lebanon War, in which Hezbollah is not supposed to be south of the Litani River. De facto, they have a lot of troops on the border of Israel. Israel has evacuated all the northern towns bordering with Lebanon. We actually have a civilian killed today by rocket fire from Hezbollah from Lebanon. So where is the UN? The UN is not even trying to act as a fair referee, of the situation here. So of course there's a lot of anger, and then of course as politicians is always also some populism.
Some populism. Well, clearly the Israeli envoy to the United Nations is not a fan of Antonio Guterres, going by the multiple statements that he's made in the past 2 months. Let me go back to Lieutenant Colonel Zahawa Solomon at this point. Well, Itai Melchior is right that when Antonio Guterres, the UN chief, said that the Hamas terror attacks on Israel on the 7th of October did not happen in a vacuum, there was a lot of backlash against that statement. However, since then he's repeatedly called for a ceasefire, trying to draw the attention of the world, including members of the UN Security Council, to the devastating humanitarian crisis that's unfolding in Gaza. It is no doubt a catastrophic situation. I think all of us can agree with that. Why is Israel so angry with the United Nations, which is essentially just calling for an end to the fighting, calling for a ceasefire, and asking for lives to be saved, asking for more aid to flow into Gaza, and saying that, this war does pose a threat to international peace and stability? And like I said, ma'am, many might agree with Antonio Guterres on that point. Why is Israel so angry with him?
Well, obviously, the anger results from his initial response to the massacre at the beginning of October. Obviously, he showed no empathy whatsoever to the hostages and clearly to the individuals who were murdered, innocent people in their beds and young children and the elderly. And he had shown no compassion towards them. And this actually is an accumulation of the growing sentiments in Israel that there is very little compassion to the wrongs done to our side. This does not justify in any way what's happening in Gaza right now. But the people of Israel were expecting more empathy and more understanding of the situation. And also there have been the evidence of the atrocities was met to a great extent with denial. Sexual assaults, the horrific barbaric killing of children and civilians. All of this went pretty much unrecognized by the UN. And even now, there is a saying, Me Too is a major issue, but Me Too does not apply to Jewish women or Jewish men for that matter. So a lot of the corroborating evidence leads to the finger pointing at the secretary, and the fact that he has not shown any empathy, and he's being seen as quite partial towards the entire Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This is not to say that we're talking about even forces here, because we are not. But the Hamas could very well have put an end, or at least could have drawn the conflict to a better end had it released the hostages, had it negotiated in more humane ways. And obviously, we in Israel feel that the UN is being very, very partial and not understanding to our side, which is quite unfortunate.
Okay, you believe the UN has been partial. People are angry about the statement that Antonio Guterres made initially. Of course, these wars of words will also continue along with the fighting on the ground in Gaza. But before we wrap up this discussion, I want to quickly remind our viewers that given the situation that's unfolding in Gaza, we are told that 100,000 people at the very least are still in Jabalia camp, which is now one of the major sites of the fighting in northern Gaza. There is no functioning hospital there, and these 100,000 people are facing the risk of starvation because no aid has reached northern Gaza since the humanitarian truce ended last week. The World Health Organization has said Gaza's health system is on its knees and nearing total collapse. The World Food Programme has said the humanitarian system in Gaza Strip is collapsing and everyone in Gaza is hungry. Not to mention that the Hamas-run health ministry says at least 16,200 Palestinians have been killed in the Israeli counteroffensive since the 7th of October, and that 7,000 of those killed were children. We leave you with those thoughts. But on that note, Lieutenant Colonel Zahawa Solomon, Itai Melchior, Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma, thank you so much for joining me on Global Lens tonight. All right, time for us to slip into a quick break, but don't go anywhere. There's plenty more on the other side.
They picked my husband. He was tortured there for 2 years.